Welcome to Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharvana Raghavan. For this episode, we welcome our first ever guest, Mr. Bharath Sastry, the CEO of Vistaprint India. Over to our hosts. Enjoy.
Absolutely, Vash. I think you also preempted my next question, which was to say, how can this be used to build your differentiation versus competition? So I think just getting started and finding your own space itself is a differentiation driver. But is there something you can do very intentionally with the brand ladder concept to identify your differentiation in the market?
Uh, yes. If you look at startups, you would have, say, if I take the example, you would have many startups playing with, say, similar kind of products, right? So in a way, if you look at some of the points of differentiation, startups may have some points of differentiation. So, and that would automatically come into the or the brand ladder. If I have, for example, in cosmetics, if I have something which is related to, say, natural ingredients or something like that, so that's a kind of a differentiator which can automatically come in a brand ladder, and that will make it powerful. But I also feel that sometimes, even if some of the differences are not there, just just having what you deliver to the customer and starting communicating about it itself and owning that in the minds of the consumer itself creates the differentiation. And that's been my experience. So if there are, say, five companies doing the same thing, if you actually found out the customer benefits and started communicating about it, you are differentiated, because the first thing that the customer or the consumer thinks about is, when he or she thinks about the product is, or the category, is you. And that's the way where I've seen actually uh, differentiation versus competition, or if I say market leadership, build. So the day you start actually communicating about your brand is when you start really differentiating and moving away and becoming market leaders.
I think
Fair.
Sudeep also touched upon this point recently when you spoke about Indigo. Do you want to talk about that point, Sudeep?
Yeah, so I think what we meant at that point in time was that your branding starts significantly before marketing. When you design your product, your communication around it very thoughtfully, when you understand your consumer well, and then you really, that passion, that energy, that affinity to the consumer, that empathy with the consumer really reflects in whatever you do around the brand. And in that context, Basha,
Right.
I was just mentioning that Indigo, you
Mhm.
for example, they have, over a period of time, they have spoken about on time performance repeatedly. Now many of us have also experienced it firsthand. Now it is possible that a lot of the other airlines have better on time performance on paper, but since these guys have demonstrated and they have been speaking about it, that creates a positioning for them. Now that is something that I will, therefore, if I need on time performance, I would most likely choose Indigo over anybody else, regardless of the on paper performance.
Absolutely, I think that's like very well articulated with an example. That's exactly what I was also trying to say.
And Basha, tell us, while we spoke about principles, you gave us an idea about brand on a page. This journey must have been also enriching in terms of, you would have possibly come across a number of, what should I say, truths, insights, etc., which possibly could be myth busting for a lot of people who are looking at marketing today. Yeah, one of the myths, for example, we just spoke about the fact that you don't need to get your brand articulation absolutely perfect the first time around, don't need to obsess over it. So that's possibly first myth that we possibly can burst. Anything, any few more bits that you've come across while working with startups that you would like to bust?
Um, yeah, one of the most common things, whether it's startups or brands, that I have come across is trying to actually fit the brand to a new opportunity, and the problems that we create, problems that gets created because of that. So normally, when you try to grow brands, and you try to look at opportunities, right, and opportunities of how to grow it. So sometimes an opportunity looks pretty enticing, Yeah. Now, for example, you're playing in a particular category, or you're playing in a particular kind of benefits. There is an opportunity somewhere which looks pretty enticing, which is pretty, where say some of the other categories are playing, or it's an empty kind of a category. So what I've seen is sometimes that really takes over, and you try to become who you don't as a brand. So you try to actually get into that opportunity and try to extend yourself beyond what is possible. Yeah, so that's a very common kind of an error which takes a lot of time to correct, actually, because you try to capture the opportunity but are not true to the brand. Okay, so again, I mean, having the brand ladder and having, I mean, or whatever template we have, or whatever template you have in place is very critical, because you know the limits of your brand. Having that in place actually is powerful, because you know the opportunities that it creates, but it also comes with limitations.
It goes into the where to play section, Basha. So, is there an example you can give us for this?
Yeah. Actually, there have been many examples where I've come through, both with established brands as well as startups. I mean, one of the ones which I mean I have handled has been Eclairs. At one point of time, we were looking at what could be some of the growth opportunities for Eclairs, and one of the huge growth opportunities that the team had come across at that point of time was the fact that you could play in a space which was a little adjacent to Eclairs, which was in the hard-boiled candy space. Yeah,
Hmm.
very briefly, Eclairs is a product which you can chew, and you have a gush of chocolate, and which you actually get immersed into, right, for the moment.
Right,
Hard-boiled candy, or for example, say Alpenliebe place, is where you actually keep going on and on. So it's like it's like you can do your work and you can keep sucking on it, and yeah, and keep
right.
going for long. So these were two distinct benefits. So, but looking at this market opportunity, yeah, we at that point of time, the team had thought that we could actually extend Eclairs into that zone by having a kind of a similar product like Alpenliebe, while having the chocolate inside that is dairy milk. The issue here was that, I mean, the whole functional benefit and the emotional benefits of Eclairs were very different, right? So we were about the gush of chocolate in which you immerse yourself, a moment where you give in, right? So the product was launched finally, and after the business was built for a couple of years, we had to take it back because we understood that this was not Eclairs.
Because it wasn't in sync with the brand ladder of Eclairs.
Yes, exactly.
And Sharon, I think make no mistake, the product did decently okay to start with.
No, I remember the product was great actually.
Yeah,
I remember the product. Yeah.
Most of these things actually doesn't depend on the product, and that's a
yeah.
that's a great point, actually, because many a time we look at product research, and once you, taking this example, compare yourself to Alpenliebe and you actually win significantly. I mean, you assume that you've really got a winner, but you've not, because that's not an Eclairs. Fine.
Exactly. I think you touched upon a great point there, Basha, because I work with a lot of founders who spend so much time on their product. And they say, my product is so many times better than anybody else in the market. But they struggle to get traction and they don't understand why. I think, and this probably kind of hits the nail on the head, saying it's not about the product as much as you'd want to believe it. It's not always about the product. In fact,
Yes.
most of the time, it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. In
Okay.
fact, the another myth, actually, I mean, as we were talking about Mythbusters, is an extension of the same thing that I've normally found that, I mean, when you take this example, I mean, it is actually an innovation, right? So we classify it as an innovation. That is, you move into a space where you try to actually launch a different product. I've actually found that most of the case renovations, that is looking at your product, which in itself is big, and even if you make small changes there, will have much bigger results than a big innovation that you do in a different space.
Oh, wow.
So coming back to the example that you were talking about, that in 2013 you had done some changes to Eclairs where you made it more delightful to customers, and even small changes, if you make on big brands, actually deliver much bigger results than a big innovation.
Very true.
True.
Very true. Now, touching upon startups, Basha, you moved into the startup world far before it became cool to do so. This was what, back in 2014, 15. So, What motivated that change at all? Because we know the kind of not just fan following you had at Cadbury, you were among the top guys there, and then you switched into the startup world completely. What was this move all about, and what drove that change?
Actually, I mean, at that point of time, it was the whole thing about actually building brands and building businesses was really exciting to me. And it's the same thing even now, even after about 9 years in startups now. I mean, I have the same kind of enthusiasm. But it was also coupled with the ability to take a lot of decisions on your own too, which should normally be difficult. I mean, not in all companies, but in some companies it'd be difficult. I mean, even if you're say the marketing head of India or the marketing head for a particular brand, I mean, there are a lot of other structures in big MNCs, right? You have regional teams, you have global teams which are working. So the decision is not, or the kind of consumer understanding that you have, and translating that into say decisions that you would like to do. I mean, it's not as empowering there. So that was one of the reasons. And you can also see able to see the results of your actions pretty significantly also in startups, right?
Hmm.
So when you're able to actually put in stuff like, say, talking to customers, building a brand ladder, and actually communicating about the brand, the kind of results that you see are significant. So it was more satisfying,
Very nice. Okay, excellent. So, Basha, I think we possibly have so many facets to talk about from your career itself. I think we can dedicate just one episode to discovering each part of your career journey and then trying to delve deeper into it. I would want to change a little bit of gears and take you towards, uh, you know, marketing oriented learning. Some of them we have already spoken about. Uh, your career also helped you market things like candies, impulse purchase products, to market something like cars, completely planned purchase products. While in Cadbury, we used to talk between candy and Bonvita. Now, your example is a little more extreme. Yeah. So, on an impulse scale, they are at diametrically opposite ends. What do you think are things which are common? And what do you think are things which you possibly discovered which are completely different between the two categories?
I mean, actually, interestingly, when I moved to startups like say Cartrade, where I was handling cars, both new cars and used cars, and on the side, you really don't feel out of place, actually, right? So I'm just talking about my feeling when I moved there, or when I moved to, I started helping other startups and also moved to Vistaprint. Really don't feel too strange or too different. I would say that's because, I mean, some of the brand principles remain the same. I mean, wherever you go, the whole say process of building the brand ladder, which is talking to customers about insights. I mean, finding out the insight. What are the product features of the brand, and what are the benefits do they give customers? These things just don't change. Whichever industry you're in, whether you're in impulse, whether you're in cars, whether anywhere. I mean, and that's one of the that's I think that's one of the beauties of actually spending time in learning about classical brand building, especially as marketers, is that just doesn't change across industries. So wherever you go, you'll be able to apply those principles as long as you've really like learned and implemented them. So that didn't change. I mean, what definitely changes is the activation. I mean, if I may call it the brand, if I'm a brand, the principles of brand positioning don't change, but activation changes. So, I mean, in Impulse, you would do signage. I mean, you would do a lot of, for example, say in Cadbury, you would do a lot of things related to appetite appeal, right? So when you go to a modern trade outlet, or when you go to a store, when you look at a product with appetite appeal, I mean, with good product shots, I mean that generates a lot of impulse. So which is activation. I mean, say higher value purchases, you need to spend a lot of time on content. So in car trade, you would spend a lot of time on actually comparing cars, explaining about cars, and you would spend a lot of time on owned media, which is on your website, trying to give as much information to make the consumer journey easier. So stuff like that. So I saw. I mean, I've seen that the activation part is something which really changes, but the most important thing, which is the positioning part, doesn't change.
Cars, Basha, I'd say, in the Indian context at least, are the second most important purchase in a person's life after their home. So how long does the transactions take, and how long must marketing be involved in this conversion? Because I know, coming from FMCG, we are all about the moment of truth, but I assume it's not just the moment of truth. There's a journey of truth in the categories you've operated. So how does that work? What does marketing have to take additionally in a journey like that?
So actually, I mean, we were in a place where we were actually giving options of cars right on our site. So it was not necessarily about the purchase of the car in the end. So I mean, you were actually helping the customer in the journey. I mean, what really mattered was the ease with which the customer would be able to say make that choice, whether it was used cars or whether it was new cars. So I mean, in your journey of actually finding out what would be the car for me, I mean, you try to find out as much from the customer as possible about who he or she is, and try to actually make that easier by say displaying those particular cars and making it easier by actually giving comparisons of those cars to him or her.
It's about the journey, being partners in the content journey,
Absolutely.
and giving them the right information basis what they're looking for, and then partnering through the journey. I think it makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
That's well put actually.
That's the end of the second part of the interview. To watch the next part, please click next or the video displayed here on the end screen. Thank you for watching CoBB. Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharvana Raghavan.